So today we're going to be talking about what I like to call the Chinese Intamin Power Duo. And that is really just the two big Intamins that opened in China in 2016, one of which is at Hefei Sunac Land, the other one is at Nanchang Sunac Land. And I think almost everyone knows these big Intamins. One is the big shuttle coaster, one is the tallest and fastest coaster in China. And those together are like the ultimate power duo.
They're so iconic, and they represent not only like the Sunac parks as a whole, but the brief era of Wanda theme parks, of which there was only about 4, I think, by the time Sunac Holdings took over. But these two parks are kindred for their giant, ambitious 2016 Intamins being like representative of the Wanda Parks era.
So the Wanda Parks era is interesting because Wanda is a giant real estate conglomerate in China known for giant malls, mostly known for the giant malls, office business parks, office towers,
movie theaters,
concepts, neighborhoods, that kind of thing. And then it was only natural for them to enter the theme park market. And then they opened a couple of theme parks, one of which is already completely closed in the southwest of the country.
Yeah.
Hasn't reopened since COVID. And then they opened a couple of other parks, and then they were constructing parks that you may be familiar with, like Wuxi Sunac Land or Guangzhou Sunac Land, Chengdu Sunac Land. But all those were then not even open under their name. They were all acquired, and the entire theme park conglomerate was acquired by Sunac Holdings, and the malls next to the parks were also part of Sunac, so those are called Sunac malls. So some of these parks, like Alex mentioned, did start off as Wanda, and especially in Hefei, it's kind of funny because when you're at Hefei Sunac Land, you have the Hefei Sunac Mall. There's still Wanda office towers in the same complex, but they're still called Wanda. So
like
that's kind of
to the mall.
Yeah, those are like, I think, the most obvious of the, this used to be Wanda. All the other ones is pretty much completely Sunac-fied already.
Sunacification.
Sunacification. And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to an episode of Coaster Kings. And today's episode is going to be about the Chinese Intamin Power Duo. As I like to refer to them, it is Soaring with Dragon at Hefei Sunac Land and Coaster Through Clouds at Nanchang Sunac. And recently, and this is probably going to be the first published China episode since our big poll, we asked everyone on Instagram and Facebook if they prefer longer episodes for China, like normal length episodes, or short form episodes where we just focus on like a really kind of specific topic or park. And those episodes would be about 30 minutes. And most people said they actually prefer, for China content specifically, shorter episodes and kind of pick and choose what they want to hear. And that's the perfect middle way, because we want to talk about China, but we also realize that China is a kind of an acquired podcast taste. So our China episodes are going to be mostly 30 minutes. So today's episode is going to be just these two coasters and maybe a little bit about the parks. And that's it. And hopefully you guys will enjoy this shorter format.
We didn't really ride anything else at these parks, so it's perfect
also very
length.
True.
A lot of our China park visits were like just a couple hours long, like little tiny bites of Chinese parks. So it's kind of fitting that we would make little episodes just focusing on the little individual park experiences instead of doing giant episodes with like a ton of parks strung together that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. So.
And in a way, it's kind of fun because it kind of allowed us to be really creative with what we're going to combine. So there's going to be some really fun episodes coming up that are just going to talk about 2 or 3 little parks maybe, or I know one park specifically, just one park, but all of it kind of fits in a shorter time frame. Now, there will be a couple, I think 3 or 4 episodes that will be full length this season. But that's because we already pre-recorded 2 of them, which is our Shanghai winter trip that we did. And that's going to be like 4 parks per episode. And then there's also another like 2 longer episodes that we're going to do that are from our most recent trip. But that aside,
Chinlong, Universal, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But that aside, we're going to also focus a little bit on the transportation aspect and location of these parks. And we were asked that by several people, like, well, how do you get to these parks, or where are they really located? Like, how can I realistically fit these parks into a China trip if they were to create one? So we're going to also start this season with discussing a little bit of where the parks are located. So on our particular trip, we do things a little bit differently. We don't really travel in a one directional line. We actually pick pockets, and then we station ourselves in the pockets for like a week. Right? Like this is the best way. Oh God, no. Not in China anyway.
It's giving Disneyland Paris train station.
Right. So what we did this trip is Hefei was actually a stop on our way down. We went from Beijing all the way down to Macau, and then we went back up to Shanghai. So on the way down from Beijing, between the Jinan part of our trip and our Changsha part of our trip, we actually spent 2 nights in Hefei. We planned on doing an entire day at Hefei Sunac Land, but we got to Hefei early. The hotel we stayed at was in the same district as the train station and the park, so it was all really quick and convenient. Mm-hmm. We ended up going to the park the same day that we actually arrived by the train, and which opened up a whole extra day to go to a different city, Wuhu, and there we did 3 parks. Now that's
my favorite day.
Wuhu Day.
Wuhu Day ended up being my favorite day, and it wasn't even part of the plan until like the day before.
We love that. And then for Nanchang Sunac Land, we actually stayed in Changsha, which is a city maybe like 2 hours per bullet train away from Nanchang. And that's where we actually were kind of more flexible with what day we were going to do the park. We actually shifted that park around a bit. My tip in general is pick a region, pick a hotel, and just like high-speed rail every single thing. That way you have flexibility. The weather's bad, or like suddenly you realize that like our park hours are like really flipped. Like we had one park that was, sometimes the parks are the hours are really kind of varying depending on what kind of crowds they're expecting, or it's a weekend or not. You can kind of flip your days around. And for us, it was necessary because of weather. But in Changsha, we had a couple of really bad rain days. So we had to kind of figure out our national parks and our theme parks, and we had to switch it all around. So for Nanchang, we took a 2-hour train to Nanchang and 2 hours back. And it sounds like a lot, but in China, the high-speed rail is so convenient. It really wasn't a big deal. It really worked out. We actually
ended up doing more than we set out to do because, like, once we started looking at cities that had better weather, we were like, oh, what if we went to the Oriental Heritage in Yingtan and like, stuff that we hadn't thought about, but there was not good weather in the areas that we were planning on going. So we were like, okay, well, let's go to these regions where the weather is good and do their parks there. And
that's the great thing about high-speed rail is that 2 hours is so much distance that the weather conditions are completely different in a 2-hour train ride away because it's a bullet train. So it travels like an airplane distance, except, so this way you can really kind of play the weather. Like Alex said, it was raining in Changsha some of these days, but then we went to Nanchang, we went to Yingtan, and we went to like Heaven's Gate and stuff on days where the weather there was actually better. But because the distance is so far, it all kind of worked out. So that's my biggest tip for you. If you take one thing away from this entire China series, it's the only thing you listen to, and you are planning a trip to China, plan pockets of parks, stay in one central location at a nice hotel. No need to drag your luggage around every day. That's a really pain in the ass. And then just take trains up and down. Like it's pretty affordable. You can pre-book them on trip.com.
Pivot.
Yeah, exactly. You can pivot, cancel your tickets and rebook. 100%. So that said, once we're actually in the cities or at the train stations or at the hotels, we usually DD or we take a metro in the bigger cities. Now, in the case of Hefei and in the case of Nanchang, we DD'd from the train station and the hotel. So that's really it. DD is the Chinese Uber. And so we just book it really on a little Alipay app and a mini app. We book it. It's super cheap. And sometimes like $2 to go like 20 minutes. Like it's
and
super
there's
cheap.
Always a taxi driver available. You'll have a car in
the
like
most
60
remote
seconds.
Locations.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that is the transportation aspect. And I know this is a little bit longer than I was planning on, but it kind of sets you forward for the future episodes. I won't repeat that. So let's talk about Hefei Sunac. So Hefei Sunac, I think, was the nicest of the 2 Sunac parks.
Which is sad.
That we're going to talk about today. So it wasn't very nice because the Sunac parks are all kind of crumbling a little bit. But I think of all the Sunac parks, this one was maybe in the most acceptable state. Would you agree?
It was in pretty good shape. At least there were people there. The Sunac parks and a lot of the other regional parks around China have adopted like a lot of like meet and greet activities and stuff themed to like anime shows. And, there's a lot of interesting stuff that they're doing to get people to come to the parks that are not at all related to like what the parks are originally intended to do. So a lot of clashing themes and a lot of people dressed up and cosplaying and doing meet and greets. And there's like music and karaoke and it's all, so it's a little weird, and there's a lot of temporary looking stuff on top of stuff everywhere, especially in the Sunac parks, because they're kind of just trying whatever it takes to get people into the parks.
Yeah, at this point, Sunac is in such a state of desperacy that all their parks offer only
Free
one
admission.
ticket type.
Mhm.
And a ticket type is pretty much like a 3-day unlimited ride pass, because admission is already free now and now they charge per ride. And then you register your face either with the ticket purchase on your app or when you buy the tickets on like a third-party app. When you get to the first ride you ride, they scan your face and your ticket, and then your face becomes your ticket. Very Asian at this point. I feel like a lot of parks do that around Asia. But the point being that it's kind of a dire mode, because they just want anyone to show up that they can. They're just trying to get people to buy food and drinks. Two of the parks already closed.
Mm-hmm.
One is now a different company that's just running it like a little shopping village, and the other one is completely closed. Luckily, we got to the Sunac in Chengdu before all speeds closed and the park was converted into something else. But long story short, Sunac's just not doing well. The parks are kind of crumbling. The flying theaters are running on time shows, and they're like pay per ride are really expensive, because the flying theater is like one of the more popular things to do in Chinese theme parks. And you can really sense that they are on their last string. So if you are planning on going to Chinese parks, go to the Sunac's. And it's actually one of the reasons that we did these parks this trip, because we had been to China so many times. I think we've been to almost 40 theme parks before we even went to Hefei Sunac. But it was just never along the way. And this time we kind of prioritized making it part of our trajectory through the country, because I think the Sunac parks are kind of struggling. And we cannot not ride these two big coasters. We got lucky with all speeds, but so many people never got to all speeds.
That was a wake-up call. And also just like the state that Guangzhou Sunac is in, because like I swung by there in January while Sean was on a work trip, and I crashed his work layover. And it's like some of these Sunac parks are really struggling. So like, Get on some of these while you can, because the Chengdu Sunac experience taught us that like we could all wake up one morning and one of these like signature Intamin coasters could be closed permanently. So
100%.
Bearing that in mind, we're like, okay, we better go to these parks. We were reluctant to spend time on these because of like concerns related to dispatch thresholds due to like our height and our size. And then just the fact that Nanchang and Hefei are sort of isolated in regions that don't have a lot of other like cultural extracurriculars right nearby. So this was the trip where we were like, okay, we've done everything else. It's time to like prioritize some of these oddball parks and really get some of these Chinese classics ridden while we still can, just in case something happens to the Sunac parks.
And speaking of opening your eyes, this trip really opened my eyes that we keep getting more creative with our trips. And this was, I think, our most spectacular trip yet. Not necessarily because all the parks we did were like the most spectacular parks, because we had hit so many of like the big parks already, and we've done a couple repeats this trip. But I think what I realized is that there's a lot out there that is relatively easy to access if you are just willing to go out in the boonies. And we've done the boonies before, but this time we got really creative, like doing Yingtan and Nanchang in the same day, and doing the Juzhou parks from Changsha. Like there's a lot out there that you can really do if you just pick a central spot. Mm-hmm. And so now our next trip, we're like, oh, there's a whole coastline of parks we haven't done yet. There's some more pockets. We're never going to get China completion, whatever you want to call it. We're never going to get to all the parks in China because there's so many. But I am feeling really motivated to do a bunch more parks that I didn't really think we're ever going to get close enough to doing. Because with this trip, we did that. We did a lot of parks that weren't even on our itinerary, and we still managed to like fit them in somehow. And that's like we're hitting and quit these parks. All these parks, we're giving a good half day, which I will say for a lot of Chinese parks with no crowds,
that's a lot
all
of time
you really need.
Yeah.
And Hefei Sunac and Nanchang Sunac are perfect examples. Like you think on paper, this is great big parks, but you really only need a half day, especially if you're our size.
Yeah.
Let's dive back into those parks, if you agree.
Yeah. So Hefei Sunac Land, we were like, okay, the park's open for like 3 more hours. That's a lot of time for us because they have the one coaster that we know we can probably ride, that we're there to ride, Soaring the Dragon. There's the Battle Jungle King dueling Jinma tilt coaster that has a strict height. Dueling. Has a strict weight maximum of like 198 pounds or 90 kilograms. We tried to ride it. They, of course, didn't let us, but they were kind enough to let us hang out in the station and take pictures and shoot video of the ride in action because the station itself offers amazing vantage points of the rides. So that was kind of them. And that one, it was like, well, we knew we probably almost certainly weren't going to ride, so no hard feelings there. But it was worth checking it out just in case, since we had already ridden the Intamin by that point a few times. No other coasters in the park, no other rides or anything of like great significance that we were really that interested in. So bearing that in mind, we were like, okay, we can cram this into an evening, and like we didn't feel rushed or anything by the time the park closed. So went straight to Soaring Dragon. Beautiful ride, incredible presence, beautiful color scheme.
I think the presence of Soaring Dragon is understated. Soaring Dragon kind of reminds me of Wuxi Sunac and their Eagle or Flying Eagle / Falcon wing coaster, where it has like a centerpiece in the park. In this case, a dragon, and in Wuxi, it's the giant rock mountain. And then the coaster kind of interacts with that, and it's like the focal point of the park. It's the centerpiece. You walk in, and the first thing in Hefei that you see is the giant dragon statue that must be over 200 foot tall. It's taller than a coaster. Mm-hmm. And then the giant hypercoaster style shuttle coaster from Intamin like surrounding it. And that is such a great focal point. I find it in Nanchang, it's like when you enter the park, you don't even really see the coaster.
Which is hilarious because it's so big.
Because it's so big,
it's so
but so kind of like tucked in the back of the park. I thought the presence and the overall atmosphere surrounding Soaring with Dragon was spectacular. And then the aesthetic they chose, it's a theme to this little village with these golden roofs. And then the queue itself has these cute, nice little queue houses that lead to the station. It's all aesthetically very pleasing. It's traditional. The trains on Soaring with Dragon were gorgeous. My favorite Intamin Coast trains ever made. They're these gorgeous white and pink trains that are the newer style, and they have really nice accents on the dragon. The dragons kind of look like clouds almost, and almost made me kind of think of the Neverending Story in a way.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? That dragon dog.
The dragon. I think his name is Artreyu. I never watched Neverending Story.
So random. It's been so many years, but mostly because that one Never-Ending Story boat ride at Movie Park Germany lives in my head rent free. So that overall aesthetic was very, very pleasant, and I think is when it comes to like the overall package, this coaster is by far my favorite of the two.
His name is they look like Falcor the dragon.
Yeah, I will show photos online, like on social media, you guys can, or videos, you guys can check it out. And then the ride experience itself. Well, Alex, you want to talk more about that?
So, looking at this ride, I feel like the idea of it is very much, it looks like I-305 aesthetically, like the style of the track and like the scope of it, the size, but like an I-305, looping coaster. And so going into it with that idea of like I-305 and how intense it is, it's not as intense as it looks.
No.
But it's so good. And I think after my initial ride, and feeling like, okay, it's not like the G-Force ass kicker that I thought it might be. It's a really fun ride and really enjoyable. And there really isn't anything about it I would change. The back spike has incredible airtime. All of the launches are really solid because it's just so big. Like a swing launch doesn't always feel like it justifies itself. A ride like Icebreaker at SeaWorld, for having a quadruple swing launch, it just doesn't feel like it's actually there for any operational purpose. But for this ride, plus it's 10 years old. I mean, the technology for swing launches and LSM launches have already changed quite a bit since these rides were built. So this ride was kind of like the whole track switch, full circuit swing launch ride concept in its infancy. And the swing launch was not only just really great of an experience because the ride is so big, but it was also pretty much to the extent of what they could do with the technology at the time. So it's a really great experience. The ride feels really long because it's already a big, long ride. And then for the segment of track that is the swing launch, there's so much good coastering that happens there. When you finally crest the non-inverting loop, it's not like a super violent over the top. It's not like super crazy airtime like Rip Ride Rocket or people brought up DC Rivals in our comments when we posted videos about this, right? And they said DC Rivals is like the super violent, like over the top experience with lots of airtime. And Soaring over Dragon, because it's so big, it's so tall, it's really more about just being up there and being up high. The dive loop is fabulous inversion, great forces because it does a perfect like 180 vertical twist before doing, like you said, almost kind of like a stall. And that rolls out into a dive loop, and then you have a big giant airtime hill, a big sweeping fan turn, and then some nice swishy, vibey laterals and stuff around the big dragon statue, and then the ride's over. So not exactly a huge force machine, but like beautiful, thrilling, and combines a lot of great forces and elements into a single package.
I couldn't have said any better. And one thing I appreciate about this ride, that everything it does feels kind of unique. Like Alex said, like the rollover is kind of unique. The way that it's shaped, it's like a giant loop with a really tiny little switch over on the top. That top hat kind of stall is really unique, especially because it twists into it in a way that I just have never experienced before, and I never really realized that until we rode. I was like, this just feels different. The ride's different, and then the rest of the ride, I'm gonna draw parallels to Millennium Force twice this episode, because I think both coasters kind of have like a modern day Millennium Force feel to it. And that is in the sense that Millennium Force is really impressive. It's large and has really big elements, but the force is not quite there, right? Like, the same happens specifically with this coaster, where it's like really impressive, really big. It has got a couple of really signature giant moments. And then it enjoys laterals. It's just really fast. It just takes that speed and it just runs the speed through the park. And I love that kind of stuff. I am a newfound lover of Millennium Force. People that listened to last season know that I'm now suddenly Team Millennium Force. I never was.
Yep.
And the first thing I said, I think when we got off the first time, I was like, oh, right, it's kind of like Millennium Force. It's like a new Millennium Force, because it's not that intense. But man, do I just love the fast speed and the big swooping turns and the trekking across the park. Because she can, kind of thing. And
the visual drama
of
the lagoon and the dragon and the trio of giant elements, the backspike, the loop, and the dive loop. The aesthetic of this ride, I just cannot stress enough how stylish and remarkable
it's
and
almost like
impactful
layered.
This ride
because
is.
If you stand at the front of the park and you look at the ride, right, you see the big dragon statue. The back, it's almost like 3 layers of ride.
Like a backdrop.
The really back layer, the backdrop is the 3 big elements that are really tall, like up to 200 foot. And then you've got your elements right in front of it, which are like, the big swooping turn. And then the very front element is just like that little turn around the dragon. And it's a gorgeous ride. And it sits actually on the lake on the backside. So not a comparison to Millennium Force in a way.
Yeah. Just a stunning ride. Just exquisitely organized.
I'm a big fan. It's one of my favorite rides in China now, which is so funny because it took us so long to get to ride it.
It's so satisfying when the expectations are high and the ride meets those expectations. Obviously not like on the intensity level. I didn't know where my expectations were because I was like, it could be really intense or it could not be intense. So I was kind of happy either way. But when you look at something like this, it's so impressive, has great stats and great curb appeal. You want it to be like a top shelf 10 out of 10. And this one really was. For me, it really delivered.
And so now we're going to move on to Nanchang Sunac Land. So Nanchang Sunac Land is a much bigger park. I will say that. It's located on like the hillsides. Nanchang is known for porcelain trade, classic black and white Chinaware from a Dutch cheese that looks exactly like Delftsblauw. And so the mall itself is actually themed to that, and the rest of the park is kind of themed.
There's a whole area of the park themed to porcelain with the spinning porcelain.
Our favorite name for any coaster, which unfortunately was closed. Anyway, so the park itself is very big. It's very big. It tried doing a lot of things originally. You can tell it has like several hills. One hill is Bamboo Forest, which has Python and Bamboo Forest, also closed during our visit. The other hill is the hill that Hypercoast sits on. There's a hill with dancing Phoenix and something dragon. I'm forgetting the name right now.
Which we were not allowed to ride for being too tall.
The park's layout is actually pretty genius with the 4 corners and the 4 big rides kind of thing, or like, the entrance and then the 3 other corners. I thought layout-wise it was pretty impressive. And it did a lot. Impressive. You can tell the original bones were like a massive concept Wanda park. This may be the whole reason Wanda stepped out of the game, because they did too much. But now it's in a dilapidated state. Of all the Sunac parks, this is the most disappointing for me when it comes to the overall aesthetic and the overall maintenance. A lot of stuff is crumbling. The queue for the coaster we're about to talk about felt like a prison yard. I mean, it was the most unkept, concretey backside of the park queue I had ever been in China. And then the overall aesthetic of the park, it's just like Alex kind of mentioned, like they're draping thematic balloons and lanterns over everything just to kind of like try and hide what was already there, what a feature's not working. they did way too much. This park is like almost the size of like a major U.S. regional park, like Kings Dominion, Kings Island, I would say. It's unsustainable. Even with the new business model, there was people, but it wasn't that busy. You know, there was really any lines for anything.
There's really school groups that were keeping the lines longer. Granted, I mean, only two of the major coasters were open. Python for Bamboo Forest was closed for track work, which, like, honestly, Sean is too tall to ride this coaster, and it has like 188 centimeter height maximum, which is really low. That's like pretty much how tall I am. And like Sean's been denied GCI coasters in China in the past for being too tall. So we were already sort of like grappling with the idea of only me being able to ride the Python coaster and Sean having to sit on the side and miss out on like this record-breaking GCI. So the fact that it was closed, it was like, okay, well, that makes that a lot easier. And we knew it would be closed before we went, which allowed us to combine this park with another park, because we knew that our time spent in this park would be a lot less when you start lopping off coasters. It's like, okay, no wooden coaster, no spinning porcelain. The invert, we're probably not going to be able to ride. So just like in Hefei Sunac, we were there for one ride, one coaster. And we even had time if we had wanted to ride like flat rides or something. They have an Intamin gyro drop, like Kings Island style drop tower that we considered riding. I ultimately, based on how my rides went on the Intamin Hyper, I decided that I probably wouldn't even enjoy my rides on the drop tower, even if I was allowed to ride, because like my rib cage was really sore from riding Coaster Through Clouds. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, this ended up being like we got the kiddie credit at the very end. Sean rode Coasting Through Clouds 4 times. I rode it twice. And mostly just hung out in the prison yard queue entrance exit area and took videos and pictures. Like how Soaring with Dragon, we was like, oh my God, this ride met my expectations. Oh my God, it was so wonderful. Coaster Through Clouds did not quite meet my expectations or my needs. There is a very large like padding modification on the lap bar. The lap bars are very similar to like the Lex Luthor and Zumanjaro lap bars on those drop towers, and there's like this pad that like sits right on my rib cage, and
it's a replacement of an over the shoulder where it's like you can't lean forward because there's a giant piece like on your belly and chest. However, there's nothing on your shoulders. And for me, I have a bit of a flatter front. It was not as bad, but for Alex, it really was like more painful. So for me, like I rode twice, and they were great rides. My second ride, the dispatch envelope on this ride is actually great. On my second ride, I had a ton of room, and I was like, okay. They let me dispatch with like all this wiggle room. Maybe it'll be better. First drop was great, and then you hit the bottom of the drop, and the left door squishes you Sky Rush style at the bottom. And I was like, just the sensation of because the airtime is really strong, even if the lap bar is down. So there's like a little bit of a Sky Rush sort of sensibility to this, where like even if you're stapled, the airtime is wild. But like it's like a cheese grater like on my chest, like scraping up and down. So after the second ride, my chest rib cage area was so sore. I was like, okay, that's enough. But I'll let Sean talk about the redeeming qualities, the good qualities. A normal person will love this ride. For someone like Sean or somebody who doesn't have like a giant chest, this is like a top 10 ride experience for them. Yeah, so for me, the coaster, I think my first ride on it was, I just didn't know what to expect, but I was not like super impressed. But then I rode it, I think, like 5 times, and I really, really loved it at the end of it. It just kind of depends on the same thing. Like expectations, you better just have no expectations. The coaster itself is really impressive because it does things a little bit differently in the way that it has the size and the scope of like a big traditional Intamin mega coaster, giga coaster kind of vibe to it. But it does things unconditionally, as in it's on a hillside. So a lot of rides actually kind of a train ride, which is kind of hard to tell in videos, but I'll get into that in a second. But it starts off with a really big elevated turn. It's such a big turn that the half of the steel used for supports is practically for this giant turn. And then you have your really steep drop. Now,
you can tell that they looked at a B&M dive coaster and thought like, we're just going to do that, but with an Intamin hypercoaster.
Yeah. And so that's really, really massive, like impressively massive. And then the drop itself is really good. You've got a high-speed overbank turn that is practically like a 180, and then you take another really nice airtime hill through the lift hill structure, and then it goes into the elevator part of the ride. So at this point, like the back end of it's much shorter than the front end of it, and that's when you realize, oh, it's a terrain coaster, because then it does a bunch of smaller elements, a couple small hills, turnarounds, and it goes around the trees, and then you have an off-axis airtime hill that kind of gives you like a lateral airtime, which is really surprisingly great. And then you go back into one more big drop, which goes down into the valley and then into the final breaks. Overall, the ride layout, it doesn't feel as creative in a way as maybe Soaring with Dragon, and we just ridden Soaring with Dragon. So the order operation for us was like we rode this second. So of course we were going to naturally compare it to Soaring with Dragon, but I do enjoy it a lot. The airtime was great. It ran super smooth. The laterals were good. The visuals were good. I just think that the overall product for me was the biggest takeaway. Is like, man, it's an ugly situation here. Like the queue is ugly. They have this like weird, almost like garden center flooring that they installed in parts of the queue, because like the queue is all the concrete's probably like below it is probably really damaged, so they just put it on there. But then that's also kind of cracked already, so you can trip and die before you make the station easily. That's right. And then you go through these like concrete tunnels, and then there's just a lot of this iron. How do you call those fences? They're like the most basic chain link fences.
Yeah, they're just like steel fences, like steel chain link fences that are just super ugly.
And then you have to walk all the way around the back of the station to where the back of the park is. There's like cars parked there, cracked everywhere. Concrete. It just really looks like a prison yard, like you're not supposed to be there. And this is the signature coaster. This is the tallest and fastest coaster in China, the biggest thing. But the whole experience of getting to the ride and leaving the ride, same thing. It just feels really like you're in some concrete abandoned field between the weeds. It's like
tragically
really kind of
unceremonious. This ride is 255 feet tall. Like, it is a massive, beautiful ride. It has the same presence as like I-305 or Millennium Force. It is so incredible.
Yeah, it's like the I-305 of China, really.
It really deserves better.
Deserves better. And it was just a shocking contrast, because Soaring with Dragon, Sunac, and Hefei, like these parks are the same age, the rides are the same age. It just felt like Soaring with Dragon was like a really nice product, has a really nice presence, and it interacts with the park. And then you get to this coaster, which on paper is the better coaster. Mm-hmm. It's the bigger coaster. It's the more impressive ride. But it just felt almost like the entire experience was an afterthought. Now, I will say most of the park has chain link fences and terrible concrete infrastructure where you can't even find the entrance to the queue because it all just looks like it hasn't been used in ages. But I guess was like glaringly obvious here with Coaster to the Clouds. But besides that, the ride itself was phenomenal. It really grew on me. Like for Alex, the comfort aspect again was not great, but for me, that didn't bother me so much. So I just really enjoyed it. I rode a couple of times. I think one of my favorite things about it is that everyone's really focused on the big drop. But for me, I think the parts where you're kind of backstage, where it does the little hops and the turns and the off-axis airtime hill, and you go really close to a tree at one point, you're like, wow, this is like a literal like tree chopper. I think it's a really fun ride. Just the ride length, a lot of good speed. It still has those moments that are kind of Millennium Force-y to me, where it's like big drop, really, like a really steep drop too. The drop feels exactly like a Millennium Force drop. And then immediately followed by a really big overbank turn that's like a 180. So I was like, that set of elements is exactly like Millennium Force.
Very.
Then another big airtime hill. So like in a way, it's almost like a Millennium Force if they just added a few more hills in there. Mm-hmm. But it still does a lot of the swooping turns, and it's not like a traditional hyper where it's like airtime. It's really like drop, element, another airtime hill.
It's very folded in on itself. So yeah, just like Millennium Force.
That's fun about it for sure.
Yeah.
But for me, I will just say that, and I know not everyone agrees with this, and Soaring with Dragon is just my favorite of the two. Both are great coasters, and they're pretty close calls, but the overall product of Soaring with Dragon is way more fun, and I just think Soaring with Dragon is more unique. We haven't seen a big intimate shuttle like that.
Yeah. It
was almost like kind of a concept ride, and it's been perfected into the more modern stuff we see now, with stuff like, Haggard it comes from this, even in a way Batman Gotham City Escape comes from the technology that was rolled out on this. A lot of stuff comes from what was rolled out on this, on the Intamin side of things. Mm-hmm. But Soaring with Dragon just does it on a skill it's just
I'm
different.
Just so grateful
really
that
nice.
Like we got all of these oddball Intamins. If you're wondering why like all of these Sunac Wanda parks each have like a giant signature unique Intamin coaster, our theory is that Intamin was able to convince the Wanda parks to buy like one of everything. Like they opened up every page of the catalog and just sold them one of everything to give Intamin a proof of concept. Because if you go to like their IAPA booth, it's half of the pictures on the booth and stuff are these Sunac coasters, because it's all stuff that like looks amazing on paper, but you can't necessarily find a client to build a ride like Soaring Through Dragon or Coaster Through Clouds or the dueling sit-down invert shuttle Intamin in Guangzhou. So like, I think that's why, whatever the reason, I'm just so grateful that they built all of these, and they're all so cool and unique. And there was never like a marketable necessity for any of these rides to be unique to each other. So it's a real treat for coaster enthusiasts to go to China and ride these and enjoy such a wide variety of cool like Intamin coasters. But all that to say, if I really liked Coaster Through Clouds, I just couldn't. It just was too tough on my body. Again, it felt a little sky rushy in the sense that like as much as I wanted to enjoy it, it was like painful to the point where I was like, okay, I can't ride this as many times as I would like. If it had like Millennium Forces trains or something, I would like it a lot better. So yeah, for me, Soaring with Dragon was like the obvious winner because it just had like the better trains. It just was such a comfortable experience.
You can kind of tell that this thing was contracted first because it's this game in between Skyrush and then all the other big Intamins. Yeah. Because the Intamin train design for Talon, All Speeds, Soaring with
Dragon, Soaring with Dragons. It's all those rides, the Velocicoaster style. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then there was that little era in between where they tried this restraint system. Yeah. And it almost feels like it's like you said, kind of like the restraint system that you find on the drop towers from Intamin. Yeah. Kind of like
you could tell that this was like after I-305 and the like shoulder strap era, but before they had perfected the train setup. Like this was definitely contracted in the Skyrush era of like the awkward in between like getting away from shoulder restraints, but still trying to figure out how to make a comfortable, safe lap restraint that wouldn't be like a punishing experience.
And despite Soaring with Dragon opening the same year, it was definitely contracted later because it uses different technology and it has the different trains. Mm-hmm. But overall, both of them are really phenomenal coasters. I personally think we've ridden almost all the big Intamins in China. You have ridden all of them because you have the invert. I don't have the invert because...
We've ridden like all of the major coasters in China, period. Now I don't think
like the smaller.
I was almost a little crestfallen. Like once we rode Coaster Through Clouds, I was like, oh my God, that's it. Like we've ridden all of the major steel coasters in China. Like
almost all. We're missing a few.
We're like the only ones that we're missing are like a lot more niche. They're like the really signature, like the iconic.
We're missing Da Vinci.
But nobody even knows. Like, hey, listener, have you heard of Da Vinci Ride? No, you haven't. Because only wing coaster nerds like us would know about Da Vinci Ride, which is at Fantasy Valley.
You'd be surprised by the amount of nerds that listen to this podcast. I'm sure people know about Da Vinci.
Major full circuit B&M wing coaster that we have not ridden. And so that one's like a personal goal for us. But as far as like the ones that like your average Western enthusiast would have a concept of knowing, ones like Falcon, Dynaconda, all the Intamins, maybe some of the Vacomas, they would know. It's like, okay, wow, we've ridden all of the poster children, all the poster boys for China or like under the belt.
And these were like the last poster children that we really needed.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we finally rode them. I really enjoyed them. Again, I do prefer Soaring with Dragon a little bit, but they're both phenomenal. I would recommend anyone that is planning a trip to China to ride them as soon as possible, because who knows what the state of the Sunac parks is right now. It's just they're not doing so hot.
Especially Guangzhou. I know this isn't a Guangzhou episode, but like, please go to Guangzhou and ride. Get at least one side of those, because those are great rides. And I would give Guangzhou Sunac maybe 2 years tops. Like, they are really,
especially
really
competition in Guangdong
not doing well. It's bleak.
And with that, anything to add to this episode, Alex?
No, I think that was perfect.
I know we promised of 30 minutes and we're already at like 38. So
we had to do some groundwork at the beginning. And
true.
If we're going to go over on an episode, it's going to be the one about the two really cool Intamins. So it's just as well.
That's fair. And that, guys, that's going to finish off this Chinese Intamin Power Duo episode. I'm hoping you're enjoying the shorter content format. And we've got like 11, 12 more episodes coming. So enjoy all of our China content and everything else we're going to launch this season. Thank you for listening. And if you are listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, now would be a really cute time to press 5 stars. And we'll catch you guys next episode. Bye.
Bye.